We were doing the axial skeleton, and this is the remaining part of the axial skeleton. This is called the sternum, where the ribs are going to articulate with the sternum. The sternum is three parts. This upper part right here, and you see a line in between. This is called the manubrium, manubrium sterni, or the manubrium of the sternum. This big one here, this is the body, and this process right here is the xiphoid process. Manubrium, body, xiphoid process. And you see a jagular notch right here, or suprasternal notch. This is a notch above the sternum, jagular. And this is the clavicular, where the clavicle should go here and here. And this is for the first rib, rib number 1. So all what you need to know about the sternum is, this is the sternum, manubrium, body, xiphoid process, suprasternal notch, clavicular notch, and this is for the first rib. This is the rib, the general structure of the rib. When you see the head and neck, so this is the vertebral end. This should articulate with the vertebra, and this is called the sternal end. It should go with the sternum. So we have head, neck, tubercle, this is the angle, and this is the body for the remaining parts of the rib. This is the classic rib. Now the vertebra. And actually, we forgot about this one, which is the sacrum, the sacral bone. And the sacrum consists of 5 bones fused together. And this is the coccyx, which is 3 to 5 bones fused together. And you're going to see, this is like the body right here. And you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because it used to be 5. And these are like the intervertebral foramina. This is our articular surface right here. This is called the prominence. And right here in the back, this is the median crest, and those are the lateral crests. So this is for the sacrum. When we go to the vertebra, we have 7 cervical vertebra, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, and those that we just did, which is 1 sacral and 1 coccyx. It is made from, or during the fetal development, used to be 5, but now you see it as 1 sacrum and 1 coccyx. So, how to recognize them? This is should be easy, and here is how to do it. Number 1, you always, the general structure in general is, take just any one. This is called the body, and this is the foramen, the vertebral foramen, body, vertebral foramen. Those are the transverse processes, and this is the spine, or the spinous process. Okay, and those, you see 2 surfaces here, and another 2 here in the back. Those superior articular facets, and those are the inferior articular facets. So again, we have the body, we have the vertebral foramen, and there are 2 arches like this surrounding the foramen. This arch right here consists of 2 parts, and this consists of 2 parts, and we will do it. But body, foramen, 2 transverse processes, 1 spinous process, and then 2 superior articular facet and 2 inferior articular facet. Those are for articulation with the next rib, so with the next vertebra. So if you see like this, so the inferior articular facets of the upper one is going to articulate with the superior of the next, and the superior and the inferior of this one is going to articulate with the superior of the next, and so on. So these are the articular facets: superior and inferior, and the inferior will go with the superior of the next, inferior go with the superior of the next, and so on. This is the articulation. If you look more to the vertebra, you will see this arch actually consists of 2 parts. There is part that's connecting the body to the transverse process, and this is called the pedicle. And there's another part that's connecting the spine to the transverse, and this is called the lamina. So pedicle and lamina. So it goes like this. This is the pedicle, and this is the lamina. Transverse process goes from here. You have 2 arches. Here is 1 arch, and here is 1 arch. Pedicle, lamina, pedicle, lamina. If you apply this on the bone, you will see pedicle, lamina, pedicle, lamina. This is the general structure of the vertebra. How to recognize the vertebra? Simply, you have 7 cervical. The most important thing about the cervical vertebra, let's get a classic one, are Number one, you compare the body to the foramen. When you see the foramen, the circumference of the foramen is larger, or the size is larger than the body, equal or larger, it means it's cervical. That's number one. Number two, if you look at the two foramina here, one, these are called the transverse foramina. Transverse foramina are only in the cervical vertebra. So beside the body, on either side, when you see those transverse foramina, one on either side of the body, you're done. It has to be the cervical vertebra. But you can add to that this foramen right here, this is called the vertebral foramen. It's the same or larger. It's usually larger than the size of the body. And when you compare it to the other vertebra, you will know the difference. And you see this is called the bifid, which is branching. You see the spinous process branching. So number one, the foramen is larger than the body. Number two, transverse foramina. Number three, you see this is dividing. The spinous process or the spine is dividing. The difference here is number one and number two, these are unique vertebra. And what's happening here is the body of the number C1, we call it with the first letter. So C for the cervical, T for the thoracic, L for lumbar, S for sacral, and C, which is called the coccyx, CO for the coccyx. So C1 and C2, also called atlas and axis. Here is the difference between those and the other five, which are classic for the cervical. Number one, you don't see anybody here. Body disappeared. Where is the body? It's added to the cervical number two. So you see two bodies. The body is like doubled or additional, and here's nothing. How did you know it's the cervical in the first place? Because we still see the transverse foramina right here. So as soon as you see them, you know that this is the cervical, and because you don't see body, the body disappeared, and you don't see even the spinous process right here. The body disappeared, the spinous process disappeared, cervical, this has to be the atlas. Where's the body of C1, which is called the atlas? It goes with the axis, and it's called now the dens. So the body, which is a double body, is called the dens. So this is the axis, which is 2. How did I know it's cervical in the first place? Transverse foramina. So you see transverse foramina, and don't see the body, this is atlas or C1. You see the transverse foramina, you know it's cervical. And you see the dens, and you don't see a transverse spinous process right here. Actually, it's not here, but for this you see the dens, and the transverse foramina. So this is C1 and C2. If you look at any one of the classic thoracic vertebra, we have 12 of those. Compare the body, the foramen to the body. You see the foramen is smaller than the body. The body is almost 1.5 or 2 times as big as the foramen. If you remember the cervical, the foramen was as large or even bigger than the body. If the body is double, it's number 1, you know that this is thoracic. Number 2, if you look at the spine, you see it's cylinder and tall. Cylinder and long spinous process, or the spinous process, or the vertebral spine. It's long and cylinder. How did you know? Because if you compare it to something like this, see the difference? This is short, bulky, and this is tall, cylinder. Short, bulky. So if it is tall and cylinder, like this, you know that this is a cervical. So, number 1, the foramen is smaller than the body. The body is almost 1.5 or double. Number 2, tall or cylinder and long spinous process or spine. And you will also see articular surfaces here. This is where the ribs are going to articulate. So the ribs are going to go like this. And this is something unique for the thoracic, because as we know, only thoracic vertebra articulate with the ribs. The ribs does not articulate with any other vertebra. So if you look at this again, you see the body is like double of the foramen. Number 2, you see the cylinder and tall or long spinous process. Number 3, if you look at the transverse processes, you will see facets, like smooth surfaces right like this, for the articulation with the ribs. So you know that this is thoracic. If you go to the lumbar, see how bulky or huge let's look at this one, which is classic. You see the body is like 3 times at least. 3 times as big, or maybe more, as big as the foramen is. The body is a lot bigger. If you look at the transverse process, see it's short and bulky. Thick, short, bulky. If you compare it to one of the cervical, see? This is long cylinder, spinous process or spine, and this is short and bulky and thick. So this is number 2. So it's, first of all, it's a huge bulky vertebra. The body is huge, 3-4 times as big as the foramen, and you see this is the short, bulky, thick spinous process or spine. And if you look at the transverse processes, you will see them the opposite, which are going to be cylinder and thin. If you compare this to the like those, you see the difference. The transverse process here is thick and short. The transverse process here is cylinder and long, which is the opposite of the spinous process. The spinous process of the thoracic vertebra is long cylinder, while that of the lumbar is short and bulky. So body, foramen, and again this is called the pedicle, and this is called the lamina. Okay. So this is a lumbar. We have 5 lumbars, and we did the sacral already. This is the sacrum, and this is the coccyx, and that's it for the vertebra.